Now, you touched on the fact that you and Brian Harding, your husband, were at the fall fair. You've had some involvement with the fair and the Corn Festival every year, haven't you?
Oh, yes. In fact, it was funny that first year I was asked to help in the kitchen. I'd never known anything about the fair before, and I got asked to help in the kitchen for 2 hours. Anyway, and that was Edelgard Wheeler. Her husband worked at the research station, and she actually worked in the fall. That's how I met her, helping to harvest potatoes. So anyway, and she was in charge of the kitchen. So I worked for 2 hours. Her next helper didn't show up. So I said, well, I can stay for longer. I ended up staying for 6 hours, and then she finally said to me, you better go or you're not even going to see your first fall fair, she said. So anyway, I went out. I ran into Brian Harding. We weren't dating at the time, but and a couple other people that were working at the station, we all said, oh, let's go to the dance tonight. And so all four of us were supposed to show up at the dance. Well, only Brian showed up. The other two said, oh, they got home and they were too tired, so they didn't come. So we danced several dances and then said good night and went our ways. And the next week he asked me out. So see, that's where it all started. And
Wow.
I've helped out with the with the fall fair every year since. And I've been president for a number of years. And I just really enjoy the fall fair. I love it when I see people's expressions. I still get a kick out of when I travel with the new Corn King in either a float or a truck or something special to show off the Corn King. Even last year, I said to the other directors, people still get a reaction to the Corn King. It's still a big thing for the corn, or I should say Corn Queen, because we did have a Corn Queen one year.
Hmm.
So even though the fair won't be in its usual form this year, we're still going to have the I call it the corn royalty competition still, because
Okay.
that is important to the area.
Yes. All of your history is really interesting. I was just looking here, follow through the memories book a bit, where in 1889, the experimental farm was known as the Dominion Experimental Farm. Then
Yes.
in 1959, it changed to Agassiz Research Station. And then in 94, the Pacific Agriculture Research Center. And then 2 years after that, in 1996, the Pacific Agri-Food Research Center. But as you said, people just tend to refer to it as the Agassiz Research Center, don't they?
Yes. Yep. And like I said, in the 70s when I first came, it was still, I found it most commonly called still the experimental farm.
Hmm. Now, so the tie-in with UBC, that was from inception, or was the Dominion Experimental Farm back in 1889? I guess maybe there wasn't even a UBC back then, was there? Yeah.
No, UBC came much later.
Hmm.
They weren't involved at all. In fact, it was just a fluke that they actually did become involved. There was a Western Regional Director that he wanted to change some things of research in the West, and he announced that the dairy program, which had been a very popular program, would be cut, and they would only have dairy research at an Eastern research center. And there was a lot of upset people about that.
Mm.
Dairy farmers, and I know even he was actually a berry specialist, but he was very much involved with various farmers. And anyway, there were meetings about it, and he didn't seem to be going to back down on that decision. But then UBC, at about the same time, they had a dairy farm right on the campus. When I went to UBC, there was a dairy farm and a pig swine research barn at the research station. At UBC. But they had been told they had to leave the UBC campus because there was going to be more expansion there, buildings and other things.
Hmm.
And they had an experimental dairy research area at Oyster River on the island. And their time with using that land, I believe, was coming to an end. I don't know all the points of it, but it had been donated or left in a will for research. But the research was to be carried on for so long, and then it could be used for other uses. So they had dairy cattle there. They had dairy cattle at UBC. And with all this uproar about the dairy research being cut, the two issues kind of fortunately came around the same time. And the decision was made that, yes, Ag Canada would still cut the dairy program, but that UBC would be allowed to come to the Agassiz Center and have a research center there for dairy. And so
Ah.
that's what happened.
Oh, I see.
It
Hmm.
appeased the people that were upset about it also helped